is a woman who has experienced SSP along with a lineage that is pretty amazing. If we get into that today, we're going to be talking about a few topics of her background, and it's going to probably be leading into a lot of rants and conversations. It's going to be a truly incredible episode. I'm so honored and privileged to have my good friend, Penny Bradley. Penny Bradley, how are you?
I'm doing great and I'm blushing. That was quite an intro. Thank you.
Oh, no, no problem. No problem. This is what we do here. You have an amazing story, and that we're going to highlight a lot of things, and it's truly remarkable some of the adversities that you've put up with going through your life and finding things out as you went, because I'm sure you weren't privy to that information the entire time, but when it started to sink in for you, and you saw these different aspects of your journey to where you are now in a different light once this knowledge had come to light for you, I'm sure was truly a uh, emotional, very heart wrenching at points, and but an amazing journey nonetheless. And I
Okay.
love when you talk about it. It's truly amazing how you've overcome quite a lot of adversity, and you are truly a trooper through life. And you sit here, Zoom call across from me, and smile, and it's truly awesome. It's truly awesome. So, if you want to start in the beginning a little bit, just to give people a little, overcap of what has happened to you, who you are in that aspect.
Um, okay. I've always had anomalies. Okay. I want to make that clear from the get go. Some of the memories that I've had, there were tracks of them going back 20, 30 years. Okay. So when it all opened up, it wasn't a total shock. Now, what happened was I ended up going to Baltimore and meeting a man who was an NSA agent. And we spent almost 2 weeks together in April into May of 2013. And while I was there, he showed me York, Pennsylvania. He showed me Washington, D.C. And he offered to take me to the NSA base in Maryland. And I had a full blown panic attack as he was turning down the driveway. So he decided to turn around and leave.
I mean, I probably would have too. Getting,
And
inside of that place is kind of like, it's sort of like an off limits place for most civilian type of people. You're like, oh, well, they're going to take my
I,
picture. It's probably going to be up on the wall forever.
he
But
asked, I asked him how he was going to get us in there. And he says, well, I have an ID. And he pulls it out. And I'm like, oh my God. But
that,
he had been using this code word on me the whole trip. And it was Free Dorothy. He was using it in reference to they have a Mormon temple in DC, and it greatly resembles the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz. Okay, so there's this footbridge that goes across the highway, and every time we would go past it, which was like 20 times in this 2 weeks, and he would say, we used to put a sign up there that would say Free Dorothy because it looked so much like The Wizard of Oz. And it was a total, it was like, why is he saying this over and over and over?
it kind
And
of
what
struck you as like peculiar in the moment.
in the moment, it was very peculiar, but the repetition, when I came home to my partner, Lou, I was hit with memories. Wham! Whole big pile, and they were all in German. And I could feel all the feels, smell all the smells, taste the tastes. But I was having trouble understanding the words. So,
That's, that, and some people who don't realize what that is, that's a form of suppression that she's talking about. That once these code words or this magic safe word, shall we say, for to put it in light terms, is used, it unlocks certain things for people, and or where people, it goes different ways too. It's not just regression to memory. It can unlock different personalities within inside somebody if they have prior training or things like that. And one of the reasons why I
yes,
didn't mention Penny's the name of her show yet, which is Nachtwaffen. I hope I said it properly, but
close.
we'll let her say it again in a moment. But it's an aspect of this um, faction that she was a part of while in SSP. So I figured we would get there and explain why it is that specific word. And also, it's a unique word, and I kind of like the way it sounds when you say it, Nachtwaffen. It
Not,
like rolls off my
not
tongue pretty
coffin.
cool. I kind of
Not
like it,
coffin. Yeah.
you know.
It's a poetic term for space fleet.
I remember you saying that to me too, because I've
And
asked you about that before.
it's actually a plural word. It's not a single word. It's there are more than one fleet in the German faction out there. So this
And
is a
and one thing we want to make clear is that when she's talking about Germans, they are not the Nazi class Germans from the time period. They are not even the German people that you'll see today. They are a elite hierarchy of Germans that left Germany. Well, when did they leave, Penny? Probably in the
they left some of them just before, most of them during World War II. They
correct,
left because they saw that the Nazi regime was losing the war.
correct.
And they had had so much harassment and even genocide from other parts of Europe that they had decided to leave the planet because they finally had the technology to.
Right.
And, things have to be pretty bad from their perspective to be willing to abandon their home world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And were
So,
they a direct opposition to the Nazis in Germany, vying for
uh,
power?
what they were the ruling class because the Germans are a tribal people. And that they were fierce warriors. This was their culture, was they were warriors. They had started off on horseback in the steppes of Asia and had eventually migrated into Germany, but at that point they were still separate tribes and there was a lot of infighting between them. They spoke slightly different languages, which is why High German is different from Dutch. Okay, these were related tribes. They were not the same peoples. And that's why it took Germany so long to become a nation compared to the other countries around it, is because these were tribes. And each tribe had its own leadership, its own aristocracy. And some of the aristocracy had intermarried. So there was a lot of, they knew each other and they were in secret societies together. So these people knew each other, but their tribal people did not. And before World War I, Bismarck had gotten the people united under the banner of Prussia. Prussia was one of the German tribes. And it was the one where the Teutonic Knights had their headquarters for a couple of hundred years. So we're talking about these people had this military monk order running their part of the world for close to 500 years before they got stupid enough to attack the Polish people. And the Poles beat them that round. That was why when Hitler took over, Poland was the first place he went after, was because Poland had beaten them before.
Revenge is a very motivating emotion, I guess, like vying for revenge, you know. And now that we speak about this, people know that I love history, and going into this history of Prussia and the tribes, and you know, I love that. I've looked into that before after we've talked a couple times, and I truly like the history is so elegant, and there's so much ferocity in specific tribes within that group, and it kind of shows even later on in like the textbook kind of history, because when we get into like the Iron Curtain or where they have Berlin sectioned
Mhm.
off, that's because these specific tribes felt patronage to specific nations after that, where they came apart again. It was
Um,
on the outside, it looked a little different than it did on the inside.
on the from what I can tell from the history books, the Allies divided Germany up into quarters. Each America, Great Britain, France, and Russia each owned a quarter of Germany. And Britain, France, and America let them combine into a country, but Russia did not. And, you know, the nation of Germany has never been given a peace treaty after World War II. They have never been given a peace treaty. Those people are an occupied nation. They are considered to be prisoners of war in their own country. That's what they are under the law.
Absolutely. And if you look at even just the reason that these specific people that maybe weren't so great came to power during the World War I to World War II was because what they did is they disarmed Germany in such a way that it crashed their economy and the poverty level. They literally had a cap on how much as a nation, they could have within their banks, shall we say. They were like bled dry, and what it did was it caused such a crash to their economy that there were literally bread lines in major cities, that it was so bad that when it got to this point of, you know, not just this like it had like this turn of, shall we say, society itself. There was a lot of drugs at the time. There was a lot of like homosexuality in the streets that was looked upon very differently than it is now. So when the Nazis came into power, the people of Germany were so tired of being abused and just being hungry and not having the qualities of life that most people should have, that they literally, you know, accepted whatever this new rule was, for any given, you know, it didn't matter what anybody was talking about. What it mattered was them getting back to what they thought was some level of society, you know. It's
If you look at the historical records about the Weimar Republic, they were not allowed to have trade with other countries based on money. They were not allowed to have trade. They were not allowed to have a military. They were not allowed to have an air force. They could only use, um, I can't think of the word, coaster planes. They could not have engines in them. Um, the banks were printing money as fast as they physically could, and it devalued the currency to the point that it took an entire wheelbarrow full of paper money to buy a loaf of bread if you could find it.
that's
And
exactly right. Exactly
it
right.
it snows in Germany just like it does New York State. We're talking feet of snow. And these people have no oil in their country. They're dependent on coal from other countries. And they were not allowed to buy it. So their people were freezing to death. If they had food, they couldn't cook it because they didn't have coal. It was extremely high unemployment because nobody would buy what they were building. So these people were literally starving to death. And the aristocracy said, we're done with democracy. That's the truth of the matter. So
Absolutely.
they found someone with the gift of gab and put him in power. And he paid attention to what they said for 3 or 4 years. And after that, he started listening to the Jesuits. And it's when he started listening to the Jesuits that he lost the war and the aristocracy headed to Antarctica. So the reason the people followed him, they would have followed him to hell and back because he was the figurehead who brought them out of starvation.
Essentially, he saved them from being. They were like worse than a third world country. It was like a
Yeah,
fourth world country. It
it
was
was
so bad.
a mess. It was like Venezuela.
Right.
It was in seriously bad shape. And he stepped in and made it where they had jobs because he bypassed the money system, created a new currency that was based on work hours instead of gold in the bank. So they had something that was of value that they didn't have to burn it to heat the house. And then he made deals with, I can't remember which country it was that broke the ice, but one of them, because Germany made such outrageously good railroads.
It was
And
Italy, was it not?
I'm not sure which country broke the ice, but one country broke the treaty and said, okay, we will trade you oil for your trains.
I think it was actually the United States.
It might have been because a lot of the companies on both sides of the Atlantic had German bloodline owners. Most Americans don't realize, they think that Mexicans are the biggest ethnic group in the United States. They're wrong. It's Germans. We have 50 million Germans in the United States today. That's more than we have any other ethnicity.
And that's of descent too, it's not just,
That's Yeah, it's not people who started off in Germany and came here. No, it's people whose ancestors were from Germany. They might be from other places too. And they don't all have German names anymore because sometimes it was the girl.
exactly right. Exactly right. And now that we've gotten into this history, let's get back to your story a little bit, Penny. Let's kind of transcend, because after we finish your story, I want to go over a couple of different topics that I've been thinking about since our last conversation on your show, and I want to get your take on it because, you know, coming from where Penny has what she's been through, she has a unique perspective on things, and to me, when we had our last conversation, there were certain things that she brought to light for me that kind of tripped my mind in the moment, but then when I sat back and like really researched what we were talking about, it like expanded the whole picture. So there's like I want to do this again, well, like that, because I feel like everybody can learn from this, and I want to learn from it. This is my show, and I want to learn something. So, but not to be like that. But
Okay. Back
so
to my story.
right, all your memories started to flood back now. That's where we left off.
The code word that he used on me was my remember code. It's the code they use when they pull you in and they want to debrief that altar. And what he did was give me the memories of the first altar that had been broken off of my core self. Now, the Penny who lives on Earth is my core self. So I got the memories of this first altar, and she was called Leutnant Penelope Valkyrin, because the unit I was assigned to were the Valkyren, the Valkyries. And they didn't use my last name, they used my unit name. And yes, Penelope is my real birth name. So
Hence why we call you Penny.
exactly. So what came up first were the most traumatic things. And some of them were from later on in the story, and a lot of them were from the mind fracture process. And some of those memories I had had nightmares about for decades before this happened. So getting the actual memory helped me with the nightmare problem. When they picked me up, the CIA abducted me from my bed in California in 1959. I was 4 years old. They took me in a Jeep cross country. We drove at night, mostly, because the underground tunnel system had not been completed yet. Parts of it were built but were not functioning, so we would drive through the tunnels. And that could be day or night, and you'd be going along and you would see the next light, not clearly, but something to aim at. So you wouldn't hit the wall of the tunnel while you were going. And so in 1959, I crossed the country in the underground maglev tunnel system, and Route 66, whenever there wasn't a tunnel. And the Route 66 part would be above ground and in the Jeep, but at night, because they didn't want people seeing a child in a military vehicle. So they took me to Langley Air Force Base, and I was there while they finished building the current CIA headquarters. But I wasn't held there. I was held somewhere else on the base in a basement, probably 2 or 3 levels down. So the people that were working in the top of the building had no idea I was there. And the first thing they did was start mind fracturing me. And they started with drowning. And I had real issues with learning to swim in the here and now, because they had taught me through this process to inhale the water, so that when they put me in the regeneration tank, I would breathe the gel naturally. And so when I went to learn to swim when I was 7 years old, I got pneumonia from breathing the pool.
Oh, man.
So these are the kinds of, there were signs all along.
Right, right. For people who don't realize what an altar is, explain to them, because I mean, we're coming into some of the audience, like your audience knows what some of these terms means. Mine may not. Some do, but some may not. What
Okay.
exactly is an altar for those people who don't understand what that is?
Okay. The simplest way I found to describe it is when you take a little kid and you torture them, they will reach a point where they decide to live or die. If they decide to die, they go catatonic and they're gone. If they decide to live, they will form a bubble in their mind around that memory. And it separates it from the day-to-day core memory of the original person. So what these people were doing were creating lots of these little bubbles.
Okay.
And eventually the bubble will forget that there ever was a main person and think it's all that there is. And at that point, the technician can start training it to be a person of its own.
Gotcha. That's a great explanation for it. That's the best explanation I've heard of it. And all these bubbles still coincide within your mind.
Yes, they are
Right.
still part of me. They are not demons.
No, no.
That's
We'll get into
I
that too with the Catholic religion saying that you're demonic
oh,
by
I
chance.
get more of it from Pentecostals and fundamentalists. They think I have to be exorcised.
Well, that's
And
they
for those folks, I have been through exorcism 104 times. If it was going to work, it would already.
with a lot of people who are very, well, I don't want to say like they drive down a narrow road and they stay down that narrow road. There's no
Mm-hmm.
turns off this road. What they don't understand, they deem demonic. That
Yeah.
happens more often than not. And it's funny because a lot of the things that if they expanded a little bit and opened up their horizons, they would see more with the light of God that encompasses more than calling everything demonic. There's a yin and a yang to everything, and God made a
Well,
duality in that manner. I'm not going to get into my religious beliefs, but
those kinds of folks have been so cruel that I've reached the point when someone says they're a Christian and starts talking Bible that I run the other way because those people have been so hurtful.
I can understand that too. That's a traumatic experience within itself. I mean,
Yeah.
and
My personal ritual trauma has been from Christians. I have never been hassled by non Christians, other than the CIA. And who knows what they consider themselves. But I was a guest at Langley. That's what they considered me for 5 years. And they spent the first year and a half to 2 years creating the number of bubbles they wanted. And the standard from my time into the 1980s, the standard was to create a 13 by 13 by 13 cubic array, just like you would in a computer. So they would start with one bubble and create 13 across from it, and then go 13 deep. And then each of those would be turned into 13 coming down.
so you're talking about almost 2,000,
It's just shy of 2,000 answers.
right?
That was the standard. And they were doing this to everybody. So if someone is younger than 35, they haven't gone through that extreme. Those of us who were older than that, this was the norm. Now,
And
they stopped doing this in the 80s because whoever they were responsible to was really pissed they had the high casualty rates that they did. My group, we lost 80% in the first year.
well, of course, I mean, anybody who has to go through just the trauma of creating those altars alone would be substantial. Like you said, there's a moment where it's either life or death, and that's when the altar is created. Most
And
of the people after the
they
few
do
couple
that
times would pick
over
death.
and they do that over and over and over and over until they get the required number of altars.
Well, that's what I mean. If every time that they do it, right, you're getting to the point of almost death. Eventually, you're going to go through it so much that you're going to say, "Just let me die. This is crazy."
That's exactly. one of the things I remember from my training, because we had technology that could bring us back from the dead and fix whatever damage they had done to us. And we had that in 1959. People understand what's being hidden from you. So we had regeneration technology at Langley when I was there. So
I know there's people now trying to work on regeneration tanks as we speak. Like there's actually people
mhm,
right now who are out there with schematics that they've drawn up from from memories, repressed memories of the SSP or Secret Space
uh-huh.
Program. And
And each faction has its own technology. So they're each working on a different tech that eventually accomplishes the same thing. Now,
right,
the faction that I was in had the same technology that the CIA did in 1959, which is it's a tank 2 meters across, 3 meters deep. They hang you from a hook inside. They have you hooked with wires into a computer panel on the outside. And the inside is filled with a gel that is made out of black goo.
how much? I know this is something that people look at too. Is how much did they have to bring back of you to actually reform your entire body? I've heard like just a strand of DNA or just pieces of DNA. I mean, like people
Um,
literally could get their heads cut off. You bring the head back, and then here comes the body right after they get back into the tank.
uh, they preferred us to bring back a head because your memories were stored in that. And if all we could find was a hand, they you may not be you when they brought you back.
Gotcha. That's a wild thing too, and it's crazy because what you see, and not to just not talking about what that is, but like and not crazy in the sense of like when I say crazy, I mean wild, because if you look at the technologies that we have leading up to right now, which is one of
Mm-hmm.
the things we're going to talk about a little bit later when we get into like the free conversation and like transhumanism and things like that, and what this AI is becoming, shall we say, that it actually comes and it stems from what the black goo has taught us what AI is once it was recovered or once it was made, whichever side of the aisle you fall on. But you know, so basically all these things that have been coming out lately have been in play through our military intelligence, through CIA, through uh, black programs. They've literally had all this technology since the 60s, the early, late 50s to mid 60s is when a lot of,
America has had it.
right, as what we know today as cell phones, computers, they've had all that forever. Like for you talking about, almost 70 years already.
Yeah, the computer on the outside of the Regen tank was basically the same as an iTablet.
Exactly. And that's been since
And they had that
1959.
in 59.
Right.
So yeah, the technology was available to them, but it came from extraterrestrials, and they didn't feel they could put it into our economy as it was then. I mean, remember the basic population was still using vacuum tubes for their TVs,
Correct. And think about that too.
vacuum tubes for their radios. And when I was on the CB in the 80s, we were using crystals.
Well, that's exactly right. And just think about that technology, right, that we're talking about. Just imagine what they have today that's going to come out 70 years from today. You know what I mean? What else they've
Mhm.
recovered, re-engineered, and produced into their own line of work. It's almost inconceivable what they may have at their hands or at their disposal today when they if they wanted to do something. And we know what they have somewhat with energy weapons and things you can see, you can't see, things that affect you on a level that it's molecular. It's literally separating your atoms from where they are. It's so many different, I've heard so many different stories. And that's why I love talking about these things because I am not an expert in any of this. I've done a lot of research into UFOs and paranormal, but learning these things, and of course I've looked into the secret space program. People have been claiming this secret space program for a long time, and I truly
Mhm.
believe that it is out there, and there are people who have experienced it. Of course, with everything, Penny, there's always people out there who are frauds. We know that that happens with
Yeah.
every specific genre of
The,
unexplainables.
I've run across quite a few of those. They don't understand that it's real and they think it's a game. And so they're just going to jump in and make money.
And
And
yes.
okay, I've got like a sheet that I
Mhm.
can go through to determine if I think someone is real or not. The real ones have PTSD.
Of course. Of course, that is the first thing that you would see because of just what you've told us from the time that you were 5 to you were a young teenager is already enough trauma to, pardon my language, but screw you up your whole life. And the fact
Yeah.
that Penny's sitting in front of us, a coherent human being able to tell her story, is a testament to how strong-willed you truly are. Honestly.
So the real ones have PTSD. The real ones are angry. You dig me deep enough and the anger will come pouring out. I try to withhold that on air because the audience doesn't deserve it. You know,
Of course, of course. That's why we're
but,
only scratching the surface a bit. And I
yeah,
kind of
but,
caught you off
but,
guard talking about your story a little bit, but I felt like people need to know who you are because I truly enjoy when you do your show. I watch all your shows. I have before
oh,
I was even a part of the network. I've seen your show on multiple different platforms, and I truly enjoy it because it's not something that I'm aware of in the way that you guys are. So I feel like that you're teaching me as we go because you're ahead of the curve when it comes to what science is capable of, what technologies are out there, and also what kind of world we're headed to when all this stuff comes to light. It's going to be everybody in these situations. It's not going to be just the people who experienced it now. Once this stuff all comes out into the light, they're going to be recruiting a lot more people. There's going to be a lot more things going down, and especially if we have some kind of like geo cataclysmic event, you'll see that there's these people will come probably to Earth and expose themselves because they'll have no need to hide anymore. You know,
I'm not sure what's going to come down. I've seen several plans put forward, and most of them involve starting basically starting over now and not ever admitting to what happened before.
hence Space Force and stuff like that.
Yeah, that they're going to start it over with Space Force. It will be public. It will be presented as great and glorious and wonderful, and nothing will be said about the 70 years of people being mind fractured and
Tortured.
tortured and and slave labor in space and have altars used over and 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 over. I have 90 versions of me out in space right now on 60 and backs. And if you do the math, because all of those are back in me, that think about how old I am, why I'm tired all the time.
Well, and explain to the people what that means that these altars have gone to space for 60 and back, that they have now they're back a part of you, and you're slowly tackling them as you come to them and reabsorbing them. And it's almost to the point where you said to me the other day that you don't want to do that anymore because it is
Well,
such a mind screw when that happens, and everything starts to you know get a little bit fuzzy at that point.
well, you're dealing with another personality in your body. And what they do is they take me, my body. Other factions will put you in a clone body. The Germans prefer you to stay in your own because their regen technology only works on your natural body. They found out right away if they used clone bodies and put them in the regen tank that the asset part would return to the natural body and they would be left with a clone with no mind. Now, it's not that clones can't have a mind or a soul, it's that they are grown so quickly that it hasn't developed yet. And frankly, the Germans didn't want to spend the time or the money to raise that infant. So because that's basically what a clone is an adult body with an infant mind.
Right. And they have take some time to get to where they need to be in fighting condition at that point.
Yeah. And the clone will eventually grow its own mind while you're in it. And that's why the factions that use clones only do 20 and backs, is because at 20 to 25 years, the clone mind will push the asset out. You're basically possessing that person for that time frame, is what the reality is.
That's wild. That's a wild thing to think about, that the clone mind could actually almost become so self-aware at that moment and push out the asset, which is, there's so many different
well, why not?
Caveats as we go.
It's basically the same thing as your identical twin. Why wouldn't it grow a mind?
Of course. But what I'm saying is, like, all these, the things that, to me, that people don't realize, but to me that shows the validity of all these things, is so many of these caveats, right? That of course you can only have a clone for this amount of time, and there's these things that we don't know, just being like, a regular person who's not into that scientific field, and you hear it and you're like, well, that makes freaking sense, doesn't it? Well, that makes sense. Like, and these caveats come up and you're like, oh wow, okay, all right, yeah, I get it. That makes a lot of sense, and it really like puts this trademark on it.
The thing that irks me, okay, because I have been placed in a clone body. I have been awake during the transfer, and that's really trippy.
I could only imagine.
But from my perspective on Earth, listening to the public, this phrase, soulless clone, how can it be soulless if it's your identical twin?
That's exactly right. It's just as if, like you said, identical twins were there. Therefore, just because, and this is something that I'm going to say that might be a little bit, I don't know, maybe out there. It's more of like a theory than when there are twins born, right? Their soul is linked in a profound way, not just in the ways that you would think, but truly linked. Like there is a connecting fiber that strings between two souls.
Quantum entanglement.
Correct.
Yeah, because while I'm here on Earth, okay, when I'm in a clone body, I'm in space, but I'm still in this timeline. So I'm bilocated. And because I'm in those two places at once, I get bleed over because of that quantum entanglement. And I get phantom pains from what's happened to that other me in a cloned body.
So if that clone gets shot, you get abdomen pains if it's shot in the abdomen.
Yeah, the biggest problem that I had was one of my clone selves who served a 20 and back, started off in a mercenary faction and got sold back to the Germans. She had been equipped with an external surgical implanted exoskeleton. Well, the places where it surgically implanted are the base of your skull and the SI joints. And Penny on Earth, my core self, had constant pain in both of those areas for the entire 5 years that she had that.
Wow. So I'm going to make an assumption. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It's just going to be a statement because now it's like there's a lot of things in my mind that I'm thinking too. And so what they do is they create, just to put like a little bit of like condensity to it, they create this altar, let's say a weapons specialist.
Mm-hmm.
They make this altar a weapons specialist. So what they do is they bring that altar forth from you. Then what they
Using
do
code
is they make,
words.
right, they make that clone body to make that altar almost have its own entity in a sense, and they're fracturing you in that moment. So this clone
Mm-hmm.
has now, can this clone access those other altars, or is it stuck with just that one altar to go forth and do its mission?
They try to make you stuck with just that one altar, but if they have the code words, they can switch you around. The way the CIA had it set up is they sell an altar and a tissue sample to make a clone together.
It's like growing an action figure with a special skill. Like
Yeah.
there's your life size action figure who's a weapon specialist. There it is, Penny's altar, Penny's DNA. There you go. And
Yeah.
you were a mercenary in while in space too, so you have a lot of these different
I
uh,
have a lot of skills.
right, a lot of
And
these traits that they would be, wanting, which would be
uh, uh, the altars are not given ethical compasses. I think that's an important thing for people to understand. When I go to reintegrate an altar, I'm reintegrating someone with no ethical standards whatsoever. Someone who has a personality, who has not been taught right from wrong, has only been taught to follow orders. And some of those are very strong personalities, very strong people. And I have to struggle to stay dominant because I've been told Earth Penny, is the only one of the whole 2000 that has an ethical compass. So I have to stay on top. So when I'm reintegrating this person, I'm bringing them into me as part of me. And then I have to deal with what this person has done, which is usually something I would not have chosen to do. And since they're basically all military or spy agencies, they're almost everything they have ever done is on the evil side of the spectrum. And I'm bringing this person into me, and I have to in order to heal myself. So yeah, it's a very stressful proposition. It takes time and effort and work. And if I start getting sick or tired, sometimes they'll pop out. I know people who've been watching my videos and listening to my radio show have noticed the last month or so that I've had a lot of altar switching in the show.
You've said that to me when we were doing the show. I didn't see it, but I'm not really attuned to what that details. You know what I mean? So I'm not.
Well,
I didn't catch it, but
there was the most recent one I did with Eric Hecker. I had 15 minutes of a child altar that was complaining about trolls on my YouTube, and
we all get that. But
we all
I
get
could
that.
complain
And
about that for hours too. I mean,
this is the. It was like Eric asked me afterwards, "What happened?" And I've been to Eric's house. He paid for my partner and I to spend a week at his house in July, and he was sitting there watching me shift altars while we talked. And yeah, I think the most troubling part of that whole visit was listening to his lady and Lou discuss living with someone with altars.
Well,
I
well,
had not realized how difficult it was up until then.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And Eric was actually going to be on my show again next week. We're going to go over some more things too. And you're more than welcome to join us if you'd like, because I
Oh,
know you guys are close. One of the person that I know that you're close to, that I'm actually close to, is Colin Giuseppe from Australia. I know you guys spent some time together and did a little bit of research together as well. I just, just to let you know that I know him through my friends Clarence Mitchell and Omar. So it's
um, he's not public.
oh well, I'm not saying he was a part of anything. I just know you're close to him.
Okay,
That's all.
yeah, we're close. He's not public. I hold a lot of his secrets, and they will stay where they are.
Well, absolutely. I mean, just
Yeah,
somebody that we knew mutually. That's how I
yeah.
got onto your show too, because he actually pointed me in the direction of your show in the beginning. Him and Clarence. That's how I figured out, what you were doing before. I don't even think you were on Gurn at that point. I think it was before that. I think you were just doing it
Okay.
yourself.
Yeah. What had happened was I had reached the point where I had 40 interviews that were all intro to Penny. And I had to have shoulder surgery because the CIA got mad about me reintegrating altars. And while I was in recuperation, all hell broke loose.
Oh man.
I had several friends that decide to pull handler behavior. And in the middle of all that mess, Alexander Cherkasov offered to do a set of podcasts with me and translate them into Russian. And he had translated some of my work into Russian before, notably work that I had done with Reality Brief. And they're a channel on YouTube. They stopped broadcasting, I guess, about a year ago. Um, and so I told him, well, I'm in a sling. So in between surgery and physical therapy, while I was in a sling, I was making these broadcasts, and we made the agreement that after 6 months I could put the English language ones on my YouTube. But he was charging per view, and he's just now getting the rest of them put into Russian. Who knew I was popular in Russia?
I think that's pretty awesome. And that's one of the reasons that I actually love being on Gurn too, is because we are worldwide. And
Yeah, we are.
I've had people from France reach out to me. I've had people from Germany reach out to me just from this show alone. And it's
Yeah.
really epic when you know that what you're saying is being digested on a world level, on like a scale that's just more than
Well,
you can fathom, and I truly believe that your story needs to be put into a book and put out there for people to really sit back and read page for page as it goes. I'm sure that
well,
there would be a
I'm
lot of roadblocks to
I'm
get that done, but
I'm writing a book that is basically the history of why the Germans went into space and where they got the occult information for Schwarze Sonne, which is the religion of the officers. And I don't know if they even practice it in the civilian side. I've never been part of the civilian side. But so I've been going through and hunting through Earth history to find what applied, because 95% of what's out there about the Germans is bullshit propaganda. Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like what we were talking about when we were doing your show. I was saying things that were kind of in the like United Nations history, but what I had Penny do is give her take on it because she has this information that's different from what you see or read or it's a different take on this specific thing because there is a history of the secret space program. And when you see people trying to uncover or basically investigate UFOs that they already know are out there, and there's a whole space program out in space, and they're trying to, on Earth make it like, well, we're going to investigate this stuff, but really it's already, people
They
already
know.
know what's going
They
on.
know who it is.
Right, right. So it gave this take to these UFO thing, like this UFO type of information, that was it was stunning. I mean, when I listened to it again, I think that what we did there was truly incredible. I really enjoyed it.
It was for me. It was helpful to see the Earth-based side in conjunction, to see them two meshing so well together, because I tracked some of the stuff. I mean, like I said when we talked before, 1965, Earth Me was keeping a scrapbook of UFO sightings.
Right, right. And
So,
it's like deciphering a code, right? Like when you're watching, like your subject, I know my subject, and when we kind of put them together, it's like looking at the other side is like deciphering this code that's like underlining to what's really happening, and it's truly
yeah,
incredible to look at it when it's like the whole picture, because that's one of the things I
yeah,
try and base myself off of, right? Is I always try and look at things with such an open mind that there's so many different sides that can tell the same story, and each one of them is going to be different. But when you
hmm
put all of those together, you get
so
this conjunction that's truly incredible because it's not only
what
human
you
perception, it's like, you know,
what you got to remember too is that there are six major factions in space, and at least well, there are two pairs of them that are at war with each other.
so let's divide it even further now, right? So we're talking about secret space program history and history in a textbook. Now, when we go to the secret space program side, there is literally six different factions talking six different ways, implementing that to the history of what you see in a textbook. Now you have even like the
Yes,
if you exponentially look at it, you're talking about thousands of different mindsets trying to collaborate. What would be incredible?
and most of the veterans only remember flashes, bits and pieces. They don't have a complete picture. What they have is basically this happened and then this happened, but there's no connections between the two. So they're trying to figure out what they remember. Where at least with mine, they used my remember code.
Right,
And I got
right.
this big old lump.
You got what they call a dump, like an email dump. They
Yes,
literally just
I got a dump.
that's
And
right.
my problem has been figuring out what it was because it's in German.
That's wild. See, this is one of the things that me and Eric talk about a lot when we talk. We talk about this trying to bring a unity to all those people because with humans all the time, or even people that are have hybrid DNA, there is this ego, right, where
Mm-hmm,
they feel what they're saying is right, and
mm-hmm,
if you look at it and your views oppose theirs, immediately you're wrong, right? So
mm-hmm,
what me and him talk about is this coming together of all these different people who have experienced all these different things, because whether you want to believe it or not, everything coincides with each other. Everything is connected. It's the synchronicity of the universe that does that.
mm-hmm,
So, being able to put all these things on paper and everybody have an open mind of understanding everybody else, what it does is it helps you to connect the dots on a almost a different level, because what you're remembering, right? With
mm-hmm,
people listen to you with an open mind to say, okay, well, I understand what she's saying, then they can look at their own aspects and say, well, wait a minute, that connects with something that happened to me here,
mm-hmm,
which will give them a map to go
mm-hmm.
forth and really connect all those dots so we can get the proper answers instead of letting ego take over. Open your mind, come into conjunction with everybody, and really put that forward to get answers that we all so desire, you know?
Now, one of the problems with my community is we have a lot of people who have flashes of memory of maybe 20 events, and they're coming public. And they're mixing in religion, they're mixing in conjecture, they're mixing in think so's and maybes, and they're making a really big story out of partial memories of maybe 20 events.
Hmm.
And
Extending it for money purposes, essentially.
so, money or fame. Um, and that's a really big problem, because then when you have someone who does remember more than that, and there are people in our community, Tony Rodriguez was on my show, and he's one of the big names who's been to Gaia, and he has outrageous complete memory, and he has verifiability on the earth parts of it.
I remember watching that. I remember watching him on your show.
And,
It was awesome. It was an awesome like episode that you had there for sure.
and he had absolutely nothing to gain by coming forward and saying I was a Satanist sex toy.
Well,
You know,
exactly, exactly, and that's
so I have
it
the
is remarkable.
utmost respect for Tony.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. You've actually
and
put
he,
me in touch with a couple of really, really good people, Penny. I have to give you that too. I mean, like, just on a level of information, not even so much pertaining to secret space program, but just information. Period. I view myself as like the ultimate outsider, you know, and I say that a lot because I don't fit into any of these communities per se, but I'm
mhm.
interested in all of them, and I love
uh, I,
researching in all of them.
I feel like an outsider in my own community, because so many of the people are listening to people from other factions, and they're taking them as gospel, and anything that I say that is different, I must be wrong. And I'm really grateful that Odin from Gurn did not have this attitude, but I've also been up against I'm older and I'm not as pretty as I once was. And that's I'm like, wait a minute, you interview men my age. You know,
I truly don't think I think that you have a beautiful mind and the way you think and I've you know I've said these before. I've said this candidly on air. I truly love your story and I admire what you do, Penny. I think it's awesome and I support you 100%, just like
thank
Daryl
you.
does. You know, I think that you are truly incredible and you are absolutely one of the great people of this network. I truly believe that. I truly believe that.
Thank you. I appreciate being on this network. And I appreciate that it's available to us, um, and that Daryl has been so welcoming to the people from SSP and UFOs and everything in between. And because most of the rest of media isn't. And this is a story that needs to be heard. I mean, yeah, the Israeli guy, what was it, 2 days ago,
Hmm.
said that the Galactic Federation doesn't want it to be told that they're real. So what does he do? He comes out and says they're real.
Exactly. It's literally the hypocrisy of what he was doing was just it was bar none ridiculous that you're like the Galactic Federation doesn't want you to know about this, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway because that's just what it is, right?
because it
What?
needs to be told. They
Right.
don't want you to know. Well, I've never heard the term Galactic Federation out there.
I have, but
I've heard it in the New Age community,
right, right,
but
right.
I have not heard it in space.
That's the difference, and that's what, when we look at things from a different conjecture, right? Like now you have your terminology that means certain things, and then they have the new age people are, they're a little bit different. And I don't know if it's because if they were out there or if they weren't, if they're just people jumping on the bandwagon after hearing a lot of the stories that you guys tell. I'm sure that there are some that are legitimate.
New Age started with channeling, and channeling before 1980 was probably safe, but channeling since 1980, you better be wearing an EMF blocker cap, or you're just listening to V2K from the CIA.
Right, terrestrial stuff. They were literally
You're
going into your brain and talking.
you're listening. If you're doing it now and you're not wearing an EMF blocker cap, you're listening to the CIA. That's it. That's the bottom line. And they're basing a whole religion on what the CIA is telling them. And every single channeler tells me they can tell the difference. Well,
There's no way.
I'll tell you, I was subjected to V2K from about 1980 until 2016 when I got an EMF blocker cap. I couldn't tell the difference.
That's wild. That's wild. To think that and we've talked about other subjects like that on this network too. That you just, there's so much suggestion from powers that be that are of terrestrial kind that are not influencing, but they're not an outside influence of this planet, but they're trying to manipulate these specific genres of of contact, or of secret space program. They're trying to not legitimize it. They're trying to objectify it through people, and basically taking the validity of what people are saying and using other people to denigrate that message of what it really is. Or they go in and they skewer the message to be something different than what you meant it to be.
We call that disinfo.
Right, right. And there's so many CIA assets out there that they use at a whim's notice, that'll just literally, like the one time I tried to talk about this coming coup that we're actually in the middle of, and it was a political rant that I was going on.
We are in the middle of not just a coup, but a replacement of our constitutional republic with something else.
Well, correct. And not to go too far into it, but I got spammed with trolls the moment that I said one word. I'm not going to say it again, but I said a specific word that I haven't said yet today, and we literally got spammed. When I mean spammed, there was 75 callers in the bar over here on Zoom trying to get in, and every time we'd click one, it was music, 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 music. When I tell you, it was the most wildest thing, but that was one of the best shows I ever did, and one of the biggest shows I ever did because of the controversy, which leads me back to why these people that are fraudulent, because if you're not controversial and you're on the radio, you're not doing anything. You're like middle of the ground. You're not really pushing any envelopes, and you're not getting noticed. So we do.
Well, I'm out there enough. I just be me.
Well, that's the same with me, Penny. And the funny thing is that when I speak on certain things, some people tend to like it, but most don't. It's kind of strange. Like, I really feel that way. I try and keep it middle of the ground now, because I don't want to be. I want to be a figure who can speak his mind and not have to worry about what people like. I don't care what people think, and I don't care what happens in that sense. But I try and keep it. It's not just me here. I have my girlfriend and my family. I don't want to put them in any danger. I've had people show up
at the door.
Absolutely.
I've had total strangers show up at my door, and to the point where I live in an apartment complex, and if somebody comes to the door and they don't know who they are, my neighbors will confront them before they get a chance to knock on the door.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
That is.
I think that's
great. Small town life.
Right, right. I'm in a small town too, and I don't have neighbors that would do that. My neighbors are fairly quiet. I live in an apartment complex too, and it's strange because once you get on this pedestal, and I hate to say it like that because you are thrusted into some kind of limelight whenever you do a show, no matter what it is. There's even if there's 10 people watching your show, that's 10 more people that would hear you besides you talking in your living room about things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what happens is you have to come to this realization, which is why I never truly speak not just about me but about my family, my girlfriend. I don't speak about those things because I don't want them to be susceptible to any backlash that may happen during a show, you know.
Well, that's why I now have a backdrop, is because I was a guest on someone else's show, and my partner resembled someone that she had been interviewing. And so suddenly he was, my partner was getting a lot of attention that shouldn't be aimed at him because he's not public. And so now I have the backdrop, and people are saying, well, you're not being transparent. I said,
Well,
my
that's
attitude is I'm protecting my partner. He has a right to privacy.
exactly why I don't mention certain things. And that's actually like a perfect way to put it to what you just said. And I just want to say to the people out there who would do something like that, that you need to like just focus on the person that's on the screen and not the people that are off the screen, because truly what happens is we're here, we're asking for it. So focus it on us and not those people,
Uh,
right?
well, we're not asking for you to shut up the door.
No, but not exactly what I meant. But right. But
I'm making that clear because there's going to be somebody out there that's going to not understand.
of
You
course,
know,
of
I'm
course.
I'm not asking to be raked over the coals. I'm not asking for you to show up at my door. I'm certainly not asking you to shoot me.
Well,
Um,
listen,
and I do not want people using their psychic abilities on me.
that's one thing that Penny has made very clear throughout all of her shows, and I've heard that before. I am not a psychic. I am not a medium. I have none of that. But it is intrusive without being asked. It truly is, and there is an ethics that goes to that mediumship, shall we say, or that psychic ability. There should be some ethical code that, without people's knowledge, you should not be doing that, whether it be astral projection or
If
anything else.
you are making contact with someone without their express consent, you are in the territory that most people call black magic. Now, you need to think about what you're doing. Now, people in my community, one of the things that we ended up with because of what the CIA did with us, we have these psychic abilities. We don't call them psychic, we call them psionics. But it comes down to it's the same thing. Ours are genetically based, and we can do a lot of things that normals can't. And things that if you do them to a normal, that normal is going to get quite hostile. So you learn really quick what the rules are. Rules of engagement with civilians. They always have the right to privacy in their own head, unless they expressly tell you otherwise. To do anything else is black magic.
I agree, 100%.
The only time the rules are different are if you are using your abilities in warfare. And then you follow the rules of engagement set forth by your faction.
I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense, and it truly is too. That you shouldn't be doing things like that if not asked. I guess shall we say, or not.
Yeah.
You have to have permission. That's almost like a universal code, and that's asking for something to happen that you don't want. It's actually bringing stuff to you that you
Mm-hmm.
probably don't want to deal with because there's not just. A, go ahead.
I was agreeing with you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It's like you know, I, Now, now that we've gone into a little bit of your story, Penny, let's get into some topics that we can, just throw around and see what we think of them. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was transhumanism, because being in this secret space program, there is a futuristic aspect to it where people may have robotic limbs or, an AI component, especially with the black goo and things like that. But there is in this secret space program, is there a transfer to trying to become an immortal being through the means of AI and computer-based sciences?
No, there is an agenda to become the equal of the ETs that we interact with. And the German officers do that through black goo. Um, the other faction I have served with is the mercenary company Kruger, and they have their assets so completely covered with mechanicals that they look like Borg. They no longer even look human. Um, so each of these factions goes about this in a different way, but the end goal is to become the equal of the ETs that we interact with. And the Germans are interacting with the Draco, who are at approximately 300 IQ.
Wow. Wow.
And are the most telepathic beings I've ever encountered, with the Mantids coming in second.
See, I've heard, like those specifics on those specific factions of alien entities. I don't know much about them all, but what people tell me. But I've actually heard that too, that they are uh, the most adept at like mental type of ambiguities and things like that. That they are really, they really, and then mantises too. That they come in, they're almost equals. It's to a point where they can.
They're almost equals, yeah. The Mantids are a hive mind. They are ruled by their queen, and she does all of their thinking for all of them, and they're connected. And so, if you capture one, you can talk to her.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
they have such a regimented society that no human could actually survive in it, because they have no free will, no thought of their own. They are complete. They are work, 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 work until they're off their time they're supposed to eat and sleep, and that's what they do. And then they're work, 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 work. They have no personal anything.
It's almost like the bugs that you would see in an ant colony right now.
Exactly. That's exactly what they're like. Except they're 9 feet tall and telepathic.
And could slice you in half with one shot. But, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
just
They have,
some things, some
yeah, some
minor
things.
differences.
Um, the Draco are a very complex race. I've heard them. Usually, humans, it's like a cuss word, but on Earth. But in space, they're treated very respectfully. Um, they're People are going to balk at this, but they are elegant. They're civilized. They have honor. They are polite until you prove you don't deserve it. And then
They become savage at that point.
they become savage at that point. The only times I've seen them savage, it was my commanding officer on Mars, Herr Capitan. Herr Capitan was one of those arrogant SOBs,
Mm-hmm.
thought he knew everything, and he was willing to order people to their deaths because he figured he could just dump them into a regen tank. And we had just finally signed the treaties from the Mars War. Well, he decided he wanted this particular item that the Mars Mantids were not willing to part with. And he ordered what Randy Kramer calls the battle of the blender. And it was savage. The guys went into this tunnel, Mantid tunnel, and as they went through to go retrieve this item, the mantids literally came through the walls and knifed. And it was literally like a blender. And very few of those men survived. And those were American Space Marines that
Wow.
had been sent. Well, the Draco had signed this treaty along with us. This was to end the war. And it wasn't even weeks after the signing, and this German had ordered this shit. And his commanding officer was a Draco and an Alpha Drac, one of the white ones, and he came in and he's towering over this guy and he's screaming at him verbally, which they don't normally talk, but he knew that this German was not telepathic, and so he was screaming at him in German, perfect German, and also broadcasting on all frequencies telepathically. So everybody in the building knew what he was telling this captain. And humans who are not modified cannot stay in the room with a Draco for more than half an hour without their brain frying. They're just not hardwired for it. They're too intense. And so he went his 25 minutes or so, knew the guy was going to die anyway, just from him being in the room. And he took out his claws and gutted him. Gutted the German right there.
Damn.
And as he did, he screamed at him, "You have no honor." This is literally the worst insult an Alpha Drac can give you, is that you are without honor. If you are without honor, you are not even a good slave. Because a good slave will serve their master well.
Right, right.
You know,
Now,
that shows their honor. And this not it was not only did this man dishonor the Germans by messing with the treaty, but he had dishonored the Draco as well. And they weren't going to tolerate it.
absolutely not.
So we waited for the Draco to leave, and we took what was left of our captain and dumped him into a regen tank. And he was a much more humble person afterwards.
I could only imagine. You just got gutted and probably half alive while it was happening. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on too that I know most people have this preconceived notion that the Dracos are evil. And I know that you feel much, much differently about that. So I want you to tell the people why you feel the way you do so they don't get a preconceived notion about these alien entities before they actually know who they are.
Okay. If the Draco wanted to kill us, they could have at any time in our history. They know that if they are around us for a half hour or longer, we drop dead. They know this, so they don't show up. So, number one, if they wanted to kill you, they would have. Okay? They're a lot smarter than us. For them to interact with us at all is on a par with one of us interacting with a guinea pig.
Like dumbing down themselves to interact with us, pretty much.
Yes. And so it's not something that they generally do. We're not on their par. Even those of us who have taken black goo, and I did as a German officer, we're still in a subservient position because they have more abilities than we do at our best. And we know it. The Germans are a little more arrogant about it, but those of us who have used the black goo and are close to the Draco levels, we understand a lot more. We see and understand the gulf. The gulf is between their level and average human. So, um, most humans have never interacted with anyone over 140 IQ. And the Draco are more than twice that. So you're talking an incredibly intelligent species who has been running an empire, a galactic empire, for 1 billion years. They're not stupid.
I mean, what could we actually ever tell them? Like that they haven't either
What
heard of or seen or whatever the case may be.
we have, you know, we have no interaction with them as a species. Okay, they might have a couple of them assigned to monitor our progress.
Right.
Now, we are physically in the middle of the Draco Empire. And according to the galaxy, the Anunnaki, the race of them that calls themselves Shahami, who look human but are bigger, those are the people who own the solar system according to the galaxy. They are paying the taxes.
That's why
Now,
we were talking about that before, about the galactical tax, that we are a burden on the Anunnaki for them to pay that tax on us to keep us where we are. Otherwise, we would have
well,
a different look.
actually, it's not so much of a burden. They created us. They hybridized themselves with the Homo erectus. So it's not like we're a burden. We are something they created for their own purposes, and now they're paying taxes on our efforts.
Like a child. We're like a child. They're paying tax on their child in a sense.
Exactly. In fact, that's how the galactic government views our relationship, is the Shahami version of the Anunnaki, the ones who look human, have human looking heads. Those, they are our parent race, and they are responsible for us until we reach a level that we can become a galactic citizen. And we are nowhere near that. No matter what religion says.
Right, right.
We are at the toddler stage.
Oh, of course, of course. But when you think of this whole thing globally and then universally, it's so incredible that there are so many different, not just factions, but beliefs and different styles of how these ruling bodies govern people. And then how you look at like our governing bodies and how they act. Now, if they knew of all this stuff on a regular level, would they act the way they do, and knowing that there's these magnificent societal conglomerations all over the universe? You know, it's you.
I don't think they ever think about it, but the way that I see us is global Earth is like your local town.
That's very true.
Okay. The solar system is like your county.
Mm-hmm.
And our county is run by the Shahami. Okay. Then you've got the Draco are the state level. Okay. You're not going to have, in California, you're not going to have Fresno County abdicating.
Well, Gavin Newsom does look like a Draco. I'm not going to lie about it, but let's just
okay. But
we'll
you
move on
see
from
what
that.
I mean? And, you know, the Draco would be the state level.
Right.
And then above them is the Galactic Authority, who actually runs the entire galaxy. And they are a galactic level civilization. I think they're level 5 on the scale. And when they say no, they can destroy your planet.
Right, right. Now, are they a mixed race? Are they all different?
The Galactic Authority is a mixed group of the level 4 civilizations, mostly in the core. And they're actually a culture in decline from what I'm picking up. They have been at a higher level in the past than they are now. But you still don't want to fight with the Guardians.
Oh, of
They're
course not.
the Guardians are the military police of the Galactic Authority, and they are who has a base on Saturn.
Right.
That's why we always think of Saturn as authority, is because that's where the Guardians are.
Absolutely. My dream has always been, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound so ridiculous, to just get in the Millennium Falcon and go and explore all the universe and then further out past all the planets because I want to know things. Like, I want to know what's out there, you
Well,
know?
there's problems with that. If you're on Earth and you're in the Millennium Falcon and you head off, you're going to be shot down by Earth Defense System, currently being renamed Space Force.
Right, right.
There are 125 ET races that are allowed access to the planet, and if you're not on that list, you're going to be shot down.
Yeah, I get that. That's, it's almost like when the more you find out, the more it's just shitting on my dream. But no, but it's
I'm
okay.
sorry,
No,
but it
not your
is.
fault. Not your fault.
I,
It's
I
other
have
things behind
I
it.
have friends who have. Okay, I have heard from the Guardians. They have told me names of people that I know who have built ships, escaped, tried to set up their own little colony somewhere, and got caught and brought back, mind wiped, and put back in time to before they built their ship.
Oh God, that's got to be extremely stressful. I mean, it's
I'm
crazy.
like, you know, damn, they pulled it off.
Right, right. Like, I just want to know a little bit about their plan, just so I can, maybe finagle one of my own. But no, it's just like
Well,
it's always been a
I
dream to
have
see outside of Earth for me. I really want to know what's out there, and I feel like there's so much more out there than is conceivable to the human mind, and it's truly an epic thing. It's an epic thing that we really need to understand that we don't know everything. And there's so much more for us to find out, which is why I can classify myself as the outsider and explore all these different communities because I want to base my knowledge in eventuality of every aspect. I guess we could say, like, if anything that could possibly happen, I want to know about it. I want to make sure that I'm privy to all the information that's out there at my disposal, shall we say. You know what I
mhm.
mean?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot out there, and the more I find out, the more I just look at it all and go, oh, I have had this problem recently where they talk about you level up,
Uh huh.
and I think I leveled up because a lot of the things that had been bugging the hell out of me started to come into focus to the point where I'm looking at the way they're fitting together and going, damn, I must have been retarded to not see that before.
Well, you just weren't at that level yet, and I kind of feel this like I don't know if I'm anything like that, but I feel like as I'm getting more knowledge, that I'm leveling up in different ways. Like there's different scales of leveling up for me. Like there's like my religious aspect and me coming into a conglomerate with my creator. I've been leveling up in. Um, I've been seeing more of an abstract view of everything
Mm.
and seeing how small it actually is in comparison to the greater aspects of humanity itself. I've leveled up like that. I'm actually doing a convention that's going to be a group meditation on December 21st. It's called Time. The time is now. Level up, which is pretty crazy. So, and somebody asked me to be a part of that, which I guess they see that. And I want to thank Omar for giving me that opportunity. And Me and my friend Leo and Omar are going to be putting it together, and it has to do with this prophecy that, basically, if we all seem to generate enough of like a meditation, we'll level up the whole society. Some will be left behind that aren't at that level, but we'll be able to open up a gate into almost the next era of what humanity is supposed to be, And I'm
Yeah,
truly
I
behind that.
I can approve of that, as long as you understand that there are a lot of people who are simply not ready to level up.
Well, of course, there are some that will be left behind, and they'll stay on what they believe is Earth, but it's not the the people who level up is basically we're gathering the people who have extra knowledge we'll call the wanderers. It's called the harvest time. And when we
Okay.
get those wanderers together, they'll hopefully boost this consciousness that we get to this point where it's not like a hive mind, but where we get to access certain records that aren't accessible with at like a level 3. We're going to go to like level 4, hopefully work our way into level 4, get on the path of level 4. So
Well, level 4 is where you go when you're astral.
right, right. So hopefully, but that we're not
Physics
going to
is a
leave our
lot different.
husks. Hopefully, I don't know, we don't know what's going to happen, so
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't happen. But
Well, I know there was a brand new baby timeline introduced, and people are being asked in their dream time. Um, I've had people describe what happened, and it's like they're shown a tunnel and it's warm and loving, and they're asked, will you go through this with just what you can carry on your back? And the people who say yes will end up in the new timeline.
that's wild. I wonder what that new timeline is like. Are we on it now?
We're not on it now. It's what the wing makers came and told us about, because they wanted to contact the person who built it
Mm-hmm.
and ask for a couple of modifications.
Wow. I mean, I honestly
that's
believe that.
that's what the wing makers whole thing was about. What their cave was about was to talk to the person who built their timeline. They went back in time to here to make that contact, and they overshot by about 800 years.
Whoops. Whoops. That's a big whoopsie, right? I mean,
And
800's pretty big.
just before the timeline was born, the CIA blew up the cave.
Wow. I truly believe that people have gone back and manipulated the timeline at certain points because
Mhm.
of such things as like the Mandela effect and, certain things that I personally remember that were different, which is
Well,
truly wild.
I'll put it this way: everything that I know about time travel, and I was a navigator in space, so um, traveling hyperdimensionally through time and space was my stock in trade. Timelines are sentient beings. You can't mess with them too much because they will push back.
Right. Right. Now, here's a question I have for you, and this is one of the things that I think of time travel, right? So when you actually go forward in time, you're not actually staying on the same timeline. Are you
Yes, you
not
are.
jumping timelines?
No,
No?
no. Timelines have a frequency, and those beings who live on that timeline have that same frequency. And if you move to another timeline, you're out of sync and you can't see, you can't hear, you can't interact. Now, a timeline can be split and then the splits come back together. That will work because they're still the same frequency.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That's a wild thing to conceptualize too. Like I know that there are many, many different parallel universes that run with ours, which is some of what you see of shadow people and things like
Hmm.
that are basically bleed throughs of those
Yeah.
instances where like time goes like this. And then when it gets that close, there's that refraction between the two that shines a light on what the other side looks like. And I'm wondering
Well,
if they see us at the same time, which they probably
yes.
do.
Okay. When you are dealing with a timeline, you are dealing with all of the frequencies of that timeline as well. And the shadow people may not be from another timeline, they may be you're close to their frequency.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So I know when I've traveled, um, there's this one level, I'm not sure exactly where it is in relation to Earth, but there's this one place where they have orcs who live like and they go, "Oh, it's you again."
Penny, it is that time for you to plug yourself. Tell everybody where they can find you. We are coming to that hour, and I really want to say thank you so much for coming on. I have had a blast talking about all this stuff, and I think that we're very like-minded on the way we think. That's just why we have such great conversations with each other. And I'm always open to do it again, and we are definitely
Awesome.
going to do it again. And I truly
Awesome.
appreciate you coming on. It was truly an honor and a privilege to speak with you again today. But tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, my show, Nachtwaffen Pilot with Penny Bradley on Gurn, is Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. I believe that's 5 to 7 Eastern. And that's on Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com. And I have a new TV show on Fringe TV that is hosted on Roku. And I don't know how they have that set up. I'm still recording episodes. And that's a challenge because they won't let me cuss.
I get that. I get that.
And I have a YouTube, and it's Nachtwaffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. And I have a Patreon. And I'll give you the link to add all of the links to add all of those to the description.
Excellent. Excellent. Like I said, thank you so much. Please go and follow us at Full Spectrum Universe on YouTube. We are on BitChute. We are on uh, Twitch. We also have a channel on Discord. Everybody who's out there, please go and follow Penny. She's truly amazing. The interviews she does with some of the people that she has on are incredible. From all of us at Full Spectrum Universe, thank you again, Penny. And that is us signing off. Have a great night. Hopefully, we'll see you all again Saturday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on the other network. And till then, we'll see you in a different universe, right?